And thank you, for joining us this evening, our Committee of the Whole meeting of Wednesday, May 26, 2021. Thank you all for coming. We don't get such a big crowd on a Committee of the Whole, so this is fun. Could I have roll call, please?
12 present, 11 present, 1 presiding, 0 absent.
Thank you. Commissioner Sorge, would you lead us in the prayer and the pledge?
Thank you, Madam Chair, fellow commissioners. Almighty God, we implore you, look upon us and guide us this night as we make decisions which will greatly affect our community of Butte-Silver. Direct our thoughts, words, and deeds so that we please you and best serve our fellow citizens. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, John. At this time, on our meeting, we have our public comment on any items that are on tonight's agenda. If there's anyone that has something to speak on tonight's agenda, please come to the microphone and give us your name and address for the record. You can turn that on at the bottom there, John. Here you go.
Yahoo. John W. Ray, 915 West Galena. And I had originally emailed this, but ended up coming, as you can see tonight, to hear the poll plan presentation, so I'd like to just read it to you. As it said on this email, it's my understanding that MDEQ will be making a presentation on the poll plan at this week's Council of Commissioners Committee of the Whole meeting. I would like to suggest that perhaps the following questions or issues are worthy of discussion and a response from the representatives from MDEQ. The first is that since this is a cash-out site and the maintenance of the water treatment plant, the engineered cap and institutional controls will be a long-term or permanent requirement, I still am concerned as to whether or not there will be sufficient money to maintain and implement the remedy into the future. Was I correct in interpreting the responsiveness summary comments as indicating that MDEQ has promised that it will find additional sources of money in the event that the money currently in reserve proves to be insufficient? Can we also be assured that local government, that is, local citizens, will not get stuck with paying for the cleanup if the money in the cash-out settlement runs out? For example, as I recall, the operation of the water treatment plant goes far longer than existing funds to pay for it. But overall, predictions are being made far into the future as to how much money is available. Given economic vagaries such as inflation and the fact that over time things generally cost more than predicted, how do we know there is enough money? In short, does MDEQ promise there will be enough money, and if needing, additional funding will be secured? 2, is it correct that there are currently no air or water emissions from the poll plant that exceed EPA standards? 3rd, since this is a waste-in-place remedy in large part, what assurances are there for the long-term maintenance of the cap, the engineered cap? Who will maintain this cap? What protocols for maintenance will be in place? 4th, the long-term application of institutional controls is problematic. What assurances does the public have that institutional controls will be properly implemented and maintained and supervised? Who will be responsible for this? How will the public be informed about what's going on? Fifth, how will environmental justice concerns be operationalized when it comes to the implementation of the revised remedy? What specifically will be done to promote environmental justice? Number 6, how will the public be informed about the implementation of the remedy as modified in the ESD that will be discussed with you this evening? What proactive steps will MDEQ take regarding community involvement? Number 7, is MDEQ confident that the problem of odors emanating from the pole plant has been solved? If not, what will be done? How, if needed, will residents be informed if there is going to be an odor problem? I might say parenthetically that this was a significant problem a number of years back, where I think 1 or 2 residents were hospitalized because of the odors, and a number suffered severe health effects. Number 8, sites adjoining each other and touching each other are being cleaned up to different standards and levels. How will the discreteness of these sites be maintained and protected so that there is no contamination transfer from the more restricted site to the less restricted site? Number 9, what specific protocols will be in place to maintain the engineered cap? How often will the cap be inspected? By whom? Number 10, who will monitor future land use at the site? Again, I would say parenthetically, this has been an issue that has hung around the pole plant for years. When will it be available for public use? What kind of public use will be available, and so forth? And finally, number 11, in the future, if bioremediation is feasible at the pole plant in terms of dioxin, will the remedy be modified to return to bioremediation of dioxin as originally stipulated in the record of decision for the pole plant? Is bioremediation completely off the table? This is an important issue because I've been involved with the pole plant going back a long time. Originally, when it was an EPA site, there was a proposal to incinerate the toxics there. Because of public concern, that was abandoned because we were assured by EPA that the site could be bioremediated to take care of the contaminants on site. And for a number of years, although there were problems with it, we were promised by the state, well, things should get better next year or in 2 years. And then a couple of years ago, MDEQ abandoned this approach and said that they were going to cap the site, another waste-in-place solution in Butte. That's my reason for asking this question. If in the future technologies become available that would allow for bioremediation, will those be used? That is stipulated in the record of decision for the site, and that's been changed. And I'm just wondering if the technology becomes available, will we go back to the original decision that I think was much more supported by the public? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. Are there any other comments to be made on any item on this evening's agenda?
Yes, there are 2 written comments.
Okay, and we have a written comment, and I do see one of the writers is in the audience, and I can either allow him to read it into the record or you can, but Mr. Bowden, did you want to read this letter into the record?
Well, I don't think I'll read anything into the record, but I sent
Oh, okay. We're just at a comment period. I'm sorry, Bill. Yeah, you're fine. Okay, I'll have Sadie read it. That's fine. Go ahead.
So the first letter is from Mr. Bill Bowden, and it is regarding communication number 2, 2021-503. And I'm going to pass around photos.
Okay, we'll be passing some photos that went along with the letter.
Cindy attached her pics of the fence on the south side of our property. They show the condition of the fence. The poor condition has resulted in cattle entering our property at least once every year for 5 years. The only time we had any success getting someone to assume responsibility was when we threatened to open the gate to our property and let the cattle onto the road. The fence was repaired, but it was very quick. It was a very quick and shoddy job. We do not have a problem with cattle on property next to ours. This is Montana after all. However, we do have a problem when they caused damage to our yard, sprinkling system, and a small stream bed. Picture 1 shows a section of fence that I had to repair. We didn't have time to wait since we just chased the cattle approximately 12 head back onto the correct side of the fence. You will note the newer patches in the right section. This morning I discovered the left section is down. The metal fence post was part of my repair since the original was rotten. Picture 2 shows 3 branches used as fence posts. These are not in the ground. They were part of a hasty repair job by a cattle owner. Picture 3 shows an original post that is rotten and is leaning. Thank you for your consideration of this matter. Bill Bowden, 112 Winkie Way. And then the other letter is from number 1 in presentations, communication 2021-217 from Fritz Daly, 1901 Roosevelt Avenue, Butte, Montana. Commissioners, I can't emphasize enough that the decisions made today on Butte Superfund issues are forever decisions and they have forever consequences. Montana Poll is one of those decisions. As I have written and expressed to the council on numerous occasions, you as council members are making, if not the very most important decisions they have ever been, made on Butte, Montana issues. You are definitely making some of the most critical and important decisions that will ever be made in Butte, Montana's history. These decisions will definitely determine the future of our great town moving forward. There is no question that the decisions made on Montana Pole, Silverbow Creek, Berkeley Pit, and the Butte Hill, including storm sewer issues, will determine the economic, environmental, and social consequences of Butte moving forward. The best decisions will absolutely include the removal of as much contaminated waste as possible. Leaving waste in place, especially contaminated waste, as is the case with the Montana Pole contaminated waste, is a bad idea. I want to compliment Commissioner Fisher for requesting the Department of Environmental Quality and the EPA to appear before the council to address the Montana Pole issue. Commissioner Fisher is very knowledgeable. He grew up in the area and actually played in and around the Montana Pole plant. He has personally witnessed the daily work activity at the pole plant for years. His entire family has lived in the Boulevard area for, I would guess, for well over 75 plus years. He is now knowledgeable of the environmental issues facing the area because of the failed bioremediation cleanup method. FYI, Butte has been dealing with this issue since 2002 when the $35 million buyout was made between the Atlantic Richfield British Petroleum Company and the Department of Environmental Quality and the EPA. Obviously, this was another decision made behind closed doors with no public input. I first attended a public hearing conducted on January 29, 2002 at the Boulevard Fire Hall addressing the issue, and I have attended numerous public hearings since that time. I also personally made a presentation to the Council of Commissioners at the request of Commissioner Joe Lee on February 4, 2003. I have sent you articles and information in the past that I know will be valuable in your decision-making process. Bioremediation is one of the oldest forms of cleanup and was originally known as microfarming or land farming. It is very similar to using a compost pile. The process required hauling and contaminated soils to an area located directly adjacent to the boulevard area. The process required tilling the soils to add oxygen and adding fertilizers to complete the process. It was obvious that the cleanup method used to address the issue in 2002 was a failed system then, and 19 years later is still a failed system. The system was not removing the dioxins and other contaminants. Most importantly, folks who live in the area were becoming sick from the strong chemical odor. coming from the facility. As Dick Talley, a high-quality and respected Butte engineer who had an environmental business in the former Roberts Rocky Mountain facility directly adjacent to the property, publicly stated while questioning the validity of the solution, stated in 2002. The solution is smoke and mirrors. They still haven't solved the problem. They haven't addressed the chemical reaction, he added. Simply adding landscape architecture does not address environmental remediation. You need to deal with this problem as an engineer, not as a landscape architect. As I stated at my 2001 presentation to council, if you could leave tonight with one piece of valuable information about Superfund, it would be to become involved and become active. Become a player in the process. Our community needs you. As former Governor Brian Schweitzer was fond of stating, and it definitely applies to this 19 years failed situation, never take your heel off the head of a snake while the snake is still trying to bite you. While I will not be attending the hearing tonight, please make my email part of the public record and feel free to contact me at any time with your questions. Fritz Daly. That's it.
Thank you. Any further public comment on any items on the agenda? We've read the items that are to be read into the record. Okay, so at this point, report of the chair. I really don't have a lot to report, except I'm glad to be back from Seattle. There's nothing like coming home. There will be something that I'm going to have our council secretary send around. I need 5 more signatures on something that has come to us through the DPHHS. It's referring to earmarked alcohol tax money. So when people buy alcohol, there's a certain amount of tax that goes toward prevention and alcohol abuse. And so there are several providers in Butte that receive this, and this is just a routine form that we fill out because the council of commissioners have to approve it. So I will be having Barb send this out. I'll need a few signatures. So hopefully that's explanatory. Okay, so we'll move along here on section 1, bid openings, public hearings, and or presentations. We do have 3 presentations. The first one is communication number 2021-217. Jim Fisher, Butte-Silver Commissioner, District 6, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization for the Chief Executive, J.P. Gallagher, to invite someone from the DEQ and EPA to our council meeting to update and explain the cleanup and future use of the Montana Pole site, and I will defer to Chief Executive Gallagher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today I'd just like to introduce David Bauer and his team as they will be doing the presentation on the Montana Pole plant. A number of the commissioners have been involved in and seen some of the presentations that have been done online. It's nice to have David here to do the presentation in person. We haven't been afforded that luxury recently. So with that, I will invite David up to the mic to start his presentation.
Mr. Bauer.
Chief Executive Gallagher and commissioners, thank you very much for having DEQ here personally. For just an FYI, this is our very first excursion out into the real world since COVID, and I guess we happen to draw the lucky straw, so thank you very much, Chief Executive. What I'd like to do this evening is go through the very same presentation that we've been giving. We gave it to the Boulevard and Williamsburg neighborhoods first, and then we gave it to the EPA community meeting, online community meeting, and then followed that up with a presentation to CTEC about 2 weeks ago. So without further ado, I'd like to go into the Montana Pole Plant South Side final cleanup construction. The first thing that you're looking at here, just the title slide, is something we've been working on. We are in the process of creating a new database, and because the other one is obsolete. And with that, we are developing some dashboards that will be public facing so that you can find out as much as you want about Montana Pole. The discharge, on a regular basis, we monitor the water treatment plant weekly. The groundwater monitoring that we do will be available on one of these. And the slide that you're looking at right here is the schematic for what we will be doing for our excavation of contaminated soils and then the confirmation sampling that will take place. So as the work progresses, the idea is that we hope to see things move from red to yellow on into blue, and blue meaning that it's past confirmation sampling and will be safe for the general public to use for industrial and commercial and recreational use. Before we dive into the construction, I'd like to just do a quick review of the history and then go into some of the requirements for the ROD. First of all, Montana Pole operated as a wood treating plant from 1946 to 1984. The contamination was discovered in 1983 as a gentleman was walking along Silverbow Creek and saw an oily substance that was emanating from the bank. The soil and groundwater and sediments were found to be contaminated by the former wood treating operations, and that contamination consisted of pentachlorophenol, or otherwise known as PCP, dioxin, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are a lower volatility hydrocarbon such as diesel, and they occurred throughout the site. EPA responded with an emergency response and other actions through 1985 through 1992, and the final cleanup plan, the record of decision was issued by EPA and DEQ in 1993, with the settlement following in 1996. The ROD cleanup requirements for soils, which is important because that's what this cleanup focuses around right now, was to biologically treat over 200,000 cubic yards of contaminated soils in a land treatment unit. And once those soils were treated, to place them back where they were excavated from. And this is an important thing to note here, because this entire cleanup is governed by a set of laws that come from the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA. And it's very strict laws that govern specific contaminations, and one of those groups of contaminations is wood treating contaminations, and they're referred to as FO32 wastes. And so once you excavate, you need to return them back from where they came. And that's very important as far as the way the ROD was structured. While all of this was going on, the groundwater was continuing to be remediated by the pole plant. And something that's important to note there is in the mid-1990s, the water treatment plant was constructed, and since that time, the plume, which was over 40 acres in size, has been reduced to less than 20 acres in size. So groundwater remediation doesn't come quickly. It's a long, long process. And the fact that we've been able to reduce the plume and also reduce the number of the concentrations considerably is a significant step in the right direction. Montana Pole Record of Decision cleanup facts. The ROD biological treatment was successful for the pentachlorophenol and the PAHs. They met the ROD cleanup standards. However, dioxins did not meet the rod cleanup standard, and this is not just something that's common with Montana pole, but throughout the country and actually throughout the world. Remediating dioxin is a very difficult thing to do, and the main reason it's very difficult is because the standard of cleanup is so significantly low. We're talking about parts per trillion, where a lot of the other contaminants that we're dealing with are in parts per million or parts per billion. The rod PCP cleanup level is protective for recreational use. However, the rod cleanup is not protective to the groundwater. And again, this is the rod cleanup that was authored in 1993. The treated soils can't leave the site. Again, this is the RCRA law, and that's why those soils had to go back to where they were. Working with Butte-Silver, all along the way, we have been working on cooperating with them on what their vision for the land would be once it's remediated. And I can attest all along the way that they were very interested and concerned about making sure that this cleanup was going to be as successful as possible and create a space that was going to be safe as possible. So what does the ESD add to the cleanup? First of all, there's new cleanup levels for pentachlorophenol and dioxin. They're not only new, but they're better. All soils that do not meet new ESD cleanup levels will be relocated on the Montana pole property to a landfill called a Corrective Action Management Unit. Again, that CAMU, that Corrective Action Management Unit, is vernacular that comes from the RCRA law. The final land designation will include the 9-acre CAMU, which will be managed by DEQ into perpetuity, and 27 acres for commercial, industrial, and recreational use, which will meet the new ESD cleanup levels. Before we dive into the construction, I'd like to turn your attention to the chart just so that you can see how significantly improved the ESD cleanup levels are. First of all, for the pentachlorophenol, we are moving from 34,000 parts per billion down to 2,000 parts per billion. The driver to this significant change is the protection to groundwater. We needed to get these numbers lower so that we could protect the groundwater from pentachlorophenol leaching down into the groundwater and subsequently taking dioxin along with it. Dioxin doesn't migrate by itself. It needs the petroleum, the PAHs, and the pentachlorophenol to move. So if we can reduce the pentachlorophenol, we can also reduce the mobility of the dioxin, and that's very important. The second reduction in cleanup levels is the dioxin furans, and the 1993 rod cleanup level was 200 parts per trillion, and that was for recreational use and some industrial use. We have reevaluated in the ESD and come up with a more protective number of 30 parts per trillion, which would be protective to industrial and commercial workers, as well as recreational users and other visitors to the site. The only thing it would not be protective of would be residential use. So let's dive into the construction. What are the plans? First of all, the construction has 5 major components to it. The first one in the upper left-hand corner, that little red spot, is treated soils that were placed back where they came from, except there's a problem with that as far as our design. If you notice the CAMU, the western edge of the CAMU strikes a direction of northwest to southeast. That is following a high-pressure natural gas supply line. So one of the main things we can't do is place the CAMU over that gas line. And so what do we need to do? We need to take that little chunk of soils and take it over to the east side of the gas line so that they will be also placed into the CAMU and protected as far as from leaching to groundwater. The second part you see there is the soil borrow storage area. That is all the overburden that came off of the interstate when they lowered the bridges. And by our good fortune, we said, sure, we'll take it and we'll store it and we'll probably have a use for it in the future. And so that's another thing that we are, I believe, blessed with. However, we still need to screen it, grade it, and get it ready for use. It's got a lot of boulders and rocks in it, and we need to get it to a grade that is acceptable from an engineering standard for the CAMU. The next part there, aside from the CAMU, which is obviously center to all of this work, is the additional removal areas. The additional removal areas are the areas that met the cleanup level from the ROD, but do not meet the cleanup level from the ESD. And then finally, the land treatment unit. So, the soil borrow storage area. We have approximately 90,000 cubic yards of clean fill that needs to be screened, separated from rocks, and stockpiled so it can be used throughout the site, including cover for the CAMU. Again, the additional removal area is originally past the ROD cleanup level of 34,000 parts per billion and 200 parts per trillion, but it does not meet the new ESD cleanup levels. And most of it that doesn't meet is dioxin. And a lot of it is in that southeast corner just below the CAMU where the teepee burner used to be. One of the handouts that I gave you tonight is a dioxin handout information sheet, and you'll find out that one of the main generators of dioxin is combustion. And so teepee burners, trash barrels, you name it, anything that's forest fires, all are sources of dioxin. And so it only makes sense that we would have a higher concentration of dioxins where the teepee burner used to be. The excavation that'll take place in these areas is going to be approximately 2 feet. Because of the low concentrations of the pentachlorophenol originally, the dioxin, based on our pre-design investigations, did not migrate very far down into the soil. It's in the first 1 foot, basically, but to be safe, we're going to excavate to 2 feet and then do confirmation sampling to make sure that we've got everything. So looking ahead to construction, the previously treated soils, like I mentioned, we have a nice little high-pressure natural gas supply line that we have to deal with and be very careful. During construction, Northwestern Energy will have a representative on site. They'll be instructing both the engineer and the contractor on site on how to construct crossings so that the pipe isn't damaged and so forth. So it's something that's taken very, very seriously, and we're working very closely with Northwestern Energy on that. The Corrective Action Management Unit. As I mentioned previously, it will contain all the previously treated soils where the dioxin didn't pass, and then it will also include the PCP that doesn't meet the new ESD cleanup levels. And all the additional removals to meet the new ESD cleanup levels will go in there as well. And then once that's done, the construction of the CAMU will be finished. As the waste is placed into the CAMU, it will be put in 6-inch lifts. It will meet a moisture requirement. It will meet a nuclear compaction requirement before the next lift will be added. And so it's a very meticulous process to put this waste to bed. And it will be done all the way until we get to the point where we have no more waste left to remove, and it'll be time to install the HDPE liner, which is a heavy-duty plasticized liner waterproof barrier, and that's being installed to prevent moisture from getting in to the pentachlorophenol. Again, why? So that we can protect those wastes from migrating down into the groundwater. And then on top of that, then will be a 3-foot layer of soil that will go on top of that. Again, 6-inch lifts, compacted, making sure that it meets engineering specs that are followed both by construction and the engineer. And then once that's done, it will be graded and seeded. Another component that is a byproduct of this is all of our stormwater management that's on the site currently is going to basically be obliterated because the surface of the south side is going to change so much. And so we have a new stormwater management system that we will construct, we're designing, and we're working closely with the Butte-Silver stormwater folks. There's an MS4 permit that we need to be compliant with. And so we're making sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted as far as that work goes. It'll contain some freshwater basins that will get drainage from the rest of the property that has been cleaned up. And then there will also be, just as a double factor of safety, the water that does happen to drain off of the CAMU will be collected and directed towards the drainage pond, the pond that's directly next to the water treatment plant for treatment. Finally, looking ahead to the construction, the decommissioning of the LTU is probably the biggest lift that we have to do out there. We have still about approximately 55,000 cubic yards of treated waste that needs to come out of there. And we've got to do all of that and make sure that as we're decommissioning it, we're meeting all the RCRA requirements. It's not just, oh, hey, let's go yank this out. We have to meet all of the requirements by law that RCRA has laid out. And if you're really interested in that stuff in the ESD, one of my homework assignments is I had to write a CAMU justification document explaining how we were going to comply with each step in the process. And that's available as an exhibit in the ESD if you're interested. Like I said, it's the most complex piece that we're going to need to do. CAMUs, repositories are constructed all the time. Engineered repositories are something that has been going on for a long time. They're very familiar with what works, what they need to be aware of. Decommissioning a land treatment unit doesn't, under RCRA, doesn't happen all the time. But the first thing that's going to need to happen is we're going to have to pull out all the treated soils and take them over to the CAMU. And of course, that'll be in 6-inch lifts and taken out very meticulously so that we make sure that we're also meeting the requirements of the CAMU. The next step is once we get past the treated soils, there is a sand layer at the bottom of the land treatment unit, and that sand layer does two things. One is it allows the leachate that came out of the soils to drain and be collected at the treatment pond that's to the west of the land treatment unit, and that would then go on to the water treatment plant to be treated. That sand layer needs to be removed. That is where we're predicting that we're going to encounter the odors. How severe those odors are, we will not know until we get there. But I can assure you that we are working on a multiple lines of evidence approach to make sure that all of the contamination that we're dealing with, the pentachlorophenol and the dioxin, are going to be at minimal and safe levels for the folks that are around in that community. There are things that can be done. One of the things to keep in mind is that, first of all, the pentachlorophenol has been reduced to the rod cleanup levels, which means that it's at recreational safe levels already. And so from that perspective, the amount of time that it would take to remove those soils would be minimal and would be within the window and be protective. But that's not enough. When we get to the bottom in the sand layer, we'll be using what's called a photoionization detector, a PID, and that is a real-time detector of semi-volatile organics and volatile organics, and we will know as we're pulling back that layer whether or not we're getting harmful vapors out of there. And if we are, then we're going to need to mitigate on site and think about exactly how we're going to address this. It may require some mixing of soils and then pulling it out, which would help reduce the vapors that are involved. But we're working on those options as well. Once we do that, the land treatment, the liner needs to be cleaned. 17 acres of liner needs to be cleaned and meet RCRA requirements before we can cut it up and haul it off. And so that's a large undertaking. And that, how do we know if it's clean? It'll be tested, just like the soils would be tested. Finally, once we peel that back, we still have the underlying soils. When the liner went down, those soils were clean as far as they met the rod cleanup requirements. In fact, a lot of those, the results in there from the original remedial investigation were non-detects for dioxin and for pentachlorophenol and for PAHs. So our job is to go in there and assure everyone that that's the same. If we find that there was a leak in the liner or something else that compromised the liner, then we will go after those areas and get them cleaned up so that they meet the ESD cleanup levels. And finally, when that's done, it will be graded and seeded. And one of the things I'd like to add right here that we've been working with Montana Tech on the seed mixture. We have pulled that work out of the bid package so that we can offer that work to local folks. The soil's going to be clean, and I feel that it's important that we offer up work that is safe for other businesses to come on to the property and help out with what I think is a very good project. Finally, the nuts and bolts of the hardest part of our job. I've got very smart people working for me as far as the engineers, and we're going to be very careful on what kind of contractor we get. But before we start, we've got to make sure that these 5 things are addressed: noise, traffic, dust, contamination, and odors. We need to have a plan when I say they're addressed. Heavy equipment is going to be operating from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. If there is concern over that, we're certainly open to adjusting those times. And the contractor cannot work weekends unless it's cleared with us. And if they're going to ask us, we're going to turn around and ask the Williamsburg and Boulevard neighborhood communities as well. Another thing that, unlike a lot of environmental construction projects, we're not going to have a lot of heavy-duty traffic coming and going. We will have some when they bring in the heavy equipment, offloaded off the low boys, and then they're going to leave. But we're not going to have a lot of haul trucks going back and forth because the waste has to stay on site. When it comes time to haul some of the debris off, the clean debris, then you'll see some trucks going down the road, but it will be very intermittent. Dust will be controlled by the contractor through application of water. It's the most effective way to control dust, except for on roads where you can apply something like a magnesium chloride or something like that to keep the dust down. But it will be application of water to control the dust. We will have real-time air sampling going on for PM 2.5, which is the state's standard for dust. And we will have action levels tied to that monitoring if the contractor has trouble because of wind or whatever else. If we need to shut down the construction, we will, to be protective. Contamination will be controlled by the dust suppression. We keep down the dust, we keep down the dioxin. It's that simple. And assure through real-time air monitoring that the dust and petroleum fumes will be taken care of. And then finally, with the odors, we're working on a multiple lines of evidence approach using the PID, like I mentioned, because we believe that most of the odors come from the biodegradation of petroleum products. That is what tends to be the smelliest. We are also incorporating an olfactory sensor device. It's called a nasal ranger. But it's an honest-to-goodness environmental monitoring device that's been in use. I'll be happy to supply the link to it. It's been around now, I think, for 10, 15 years and used very effectively for offensive odors in communities and helping to devise a way to suppress those odors. Just as an FYI, one of the biggest uses right now happens to be in the cannabis industry. So on to institutional controls. We have 3 of them. One of them isn't just ours. We share it with the Butte priority soils, and that's the Butte alluvial bedrock groundwater area. And that was instituted in 2009. And that, even though, and that was, you know, that's one of the questions that was posed to me is like, why are you even worried about protecting the groundwater? There's already a groundwater control area in there, and it, you know, it's already contaminated. And it's like, that's not the way it works. You know, the way it works to make something clean again is you stop making the mess in it. And that's the way it works. And so it's really important to me and to my technical team that we have a cleanup level that's going to be protective of the groundwater and that we leave that in good shape so that that groundwater has a chance to heal, because it's going to take a long time. The second thing that will require the institutional controls is the CAMU, and that is required, again, by RCRA to be operated and maintained. It has specific requirements that we have to comply with. We will have an operation and maintenance manual that will dictate how many days we go out and inspect that. It's more critical with a CAMU or a repository in the early years when you don't have good seed growth yet and good root control. You want to get out there, control the rilling, control anything like that that can happen, and aggressively get that seed to taking off as much as possible. Not only will we be doing everything per the operation and maintenance manual that we develop, and we will not develop that until we're done, because until we know what we have as far as the CAMU, as far as the height and the final design and everything else, that is when it will be time to construct the operation and maintenance manual so that it meets the specific needs of what's been constructed. And that will also include maintaining the drainage areas around the CAMU. It will also require 5-year reviews, just like any other cleanup under EPA. And then finally, the restrictive covenants for the 27 acres to ensure that there will not be residential development because the cleanup numbers do not meet residential. It was not required in the ROD. In fact, it was stipulated that that was not what was going to happen. The property was intended for industrial and commercial use and potentially recreational use. So, public involvement for the final offload construction. Here I am for, what, the fourth time, reaching out to the public. I'm happy to pick up the phone at any time and discuss questions, as is the rest of the staff. We have an excellent public information officer, and she is more than willing to reach out, give the answers that are necessary, that are either already in public documents or we have somewhere, or we need to answer because we haven't been posed with that question before. We have media outreach. We have newsletters that we've sent out to the Boulevard neighborhood. And we intend to give those updates on a regular basis. And then the very good points that Dr. Ray brought up, those 11 points, we have received and responded to a number of those questions from Dr. Ray already, and we would be happy to provide those answers and any additional information that you may request. And again, all you need to do is get a hold of us and we'd be more than happy to provide those answers. And a number of them are also in the ESD, in the public response section. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. Are there any questions from the council members? Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer, for being here. It's good information. And through emails, I think we visited a little bit in the past. And I'd just like to express my concerns because I was raised on the boulevard. And, I watched the open irrigation ditches of these poles being treated in that area. And, my family and friends in the boulevard, we've had a lot of people die of cancer and, neurological things like that. So it's kind of dear to my heart. But I do have a lot of questions. I'm not going to bring them up tonight because your presentation was great. And I look forward to visiting you in the future. But I do have a couple of questions if the Madam Chair would allow me to go forward from it. Thank you, Madam Chair. So when this was originally set at $37 or $34 million, whatever it was, that was in like 2002 or 2006 or somewhere around there?
1996 is when the settlement was done.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Fisher.
So now, how things have changed. I mean, with this cleanup you're going to do now, is it estimated like $5 or $6 million? Is that what I understand?
Commissioner Fisher, right now what we do know as fact is it's going to cost in the neighborhood of an additional $1.7 million. We provided that information. Actually, we've been working on since 2016, when we did the 30% design, we've been cognizant of what was the original cleanup, what are the costs today of those components versus what are the new things that we want to add. What is it going to cost in addition? And so what we're really confident with right now is we're going to be in the ballpark of that 1.7. The rest of the cost, we're not going to know, and nor do we want to reveal until the bid package goes out for bid. We have an engineer's estimate that's been developed, and then once the bid is awarded, both of those become public information and would be happy to share with you at that time. However, in this business, which is very iterative, you're always going back. As soon as we start peeling away the ground, we're going to find things. Rest assured, it always happens. We won't know what the final cost of the cleanup is until we're done. And that's just the way that this business works. I'm not speaking from a lack of experience, I just finished a $49 million cash-out cleanup, and it had a heck of a lot of surprises in it. You know, that's just the way the business is, but we will have a good idea based on the engineer's estimate and that awarded bid. And our main job is to hold the contractor to that as much as possible. If they're legitimate surprises, they're legitimate surprises, and we're gonna have to deal with them. But we're gonna hold the contractor's feet to the fire if they're just not getting the job done, so.
Follow-up, Commissioner Fisher, and then
Chair,
Commissioner
one more
Sorge.
question, then I'll follow up with you during the week, because we got a big night and there's other people who have questions. So, I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but the last cleanup was a failed cleanup. You know, the contractor was excused from the job for lack of compliance, if I believe right.
That I'm not familiar with. I came on in 2016, and so I'm not, if you could give me the date and the nature of that cleanup, I'd be more than happy to research that.
I will do that in the future. So what I'm saying, I guess, to follow up is, what kind of assurances do we have that this cleanup is going to do the job? I mean, we go back here to 1983. I mean, I was pictured on the interstate in 1962 as the highway went through. I seen a lot of that. And underneath the bridges, there's a lot of, you know, that's where the creosote was. We call as kids. That's where our animals died from licking their paws. So do you have any assurances that this works, or if it don't work, I guess John Ray brought up the question, where does the money come from? You know, where does the taxpayers not be on the hook for this burden?
Mr. Bauer.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Fisher. Again, that's a very difficult question because the business is very iterative. We were given a finite amount and told to go forth and do the job. And as we look at each component of the cleanup, which we're getting close, this is a big step. The last phase that's really left, that's the big one, is that contamination under the interstate and a couple of other discrete spots of contamination that are just really being persistent and not going away the way we'd like to see through pump and treat. Pump and treat is a great, which is what the water treatment plant's doing now, is a great remedy for the beginning, but it's an awful remedy for the end. It's an absolutely awful remedy for the end. And what you need to do is to get in there and aggressively attack those areas that are left, because you can speed up the amount of time left for the pump and treat. You can enhance that in pump and treat. And if you speed it up and take 7 years off, that's $7 million. If you take 11 years off, that's $11 million. It's, you know, it's very evident to us what we want to do as scientists and engineers. And it's just going to be a matter of time before we know. You know, the money was awarded in 1996. The $49 million cleanup was awarded in 2007, and we just finished this year, you know, and one of the things I'm going to propose next week to CTEC is to allow a presentation that shows a little more into the work that we do and how we arrive at decisions and how we pursue the science that's in, because we realize that the public doesn't necessarily know what we do. You know, we come to these presentations and tell you we're going to do this and we're going to do that, but the public doesn't really know how we arrive at that. And so I'm going to propose to CTEC that we be allowed to do a presentation that kind of explains how we handle cash-out settlements. They're challenging and they're fun. I may be a little bit touched in the head, but I think it's a tremendous challenge for the people of Montana to benefit from this. So, you know, I'm excited about this cleanup. My technical team is excited about this cleanup. And we're excited about the future.
Commissioner Sorge, and then Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bauer, for being here tonight. You know, I think we all have concerns, and we all want to see it done and over with. So I've got a couple of questions kind of related to that. My first question is, what kind of time frame are we talking about, and when will we start on the construction side?
Mr. Bauer.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorich. The time frame is starting somewhere in July, August, and depending on what the contractor wants to do, it's either they're gonna go for everything this year or carry over into next year. There's a couple of critical technical things that need to be done that can't be done in cold weather. You cannot put down an HDPE liner in cold weather. It needs to be heat seamed, and it needs to pass technical specifications, and you almost always fail in cold weather. So 2022 would be the end.
Thank you, Mr. Gar.
Follow-up, Commissioner
One more
Sorg.
follow-up. Okay, then you also mentioned about the 5-year review. Okay, how long does that 5-year review go into perpetuity? I guess my concern is, again, we really don't know how much money we have. We don't know how much it's going to cost. We don't know where we're going, or I'm not sure how we're going to get there yet. So the 5-year review, let's say in 20 years from now, we're seeing the liner failed. Is there going to be any kind of backstop? Is there going to be any kind of trust fund? We don't know any of that. And I'm concerned this is going to be falling on a liability of the Butte-Silver taxpayer.
That's an excellent question and an excellent concern, Commissioner Sorich. Again, at the previous site I just wrapped up, we have a 16-acre repository that has a trust that is set up for it to ensure that the operation and maintenance can carry on into perpetuity, whatever that is. And we intend to do the very same thing with the CAMU once we have the O&M plan, and then we can do the math and figure it out.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council members? Commissioner Frederickson and then Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Bauer, for the great presentation. My question is for County Attorney Joyce. Through the public comment letter and the email we received earlier today, it's kind of implied or it's stated that we're going to be making some sort of decision on this. And so I guess I just want confirmation, we're not a PRP in this. And, as far as I can tell, we're not going to be this body isn't going to be making any sort of decisions on this. And so I just want you to confirm that so we can get it out there in the public, I guess.
Mr. Bauer.
No, County Attorney Joyce.
Oh, County Attorney Joyce, sorry.
You are accurate. We are not a PRP, and so this body will not be being asked to make any decisions regarding this cleanup.
Follow-up, Commissioner Frederickson.
Yeah, now I have a follow-up for Mr. Bauer. So the CAMU, is that going to be fenced? If I remember right, when you first presented to us, you showed a photo of a mound that had grass on it. And so I'm wondering if that's going to be, when it's all said and done, if that's going to be closed and grassed, or is it just going to be a fenced mound that no one can even go in there and
Mr.
just
Bauer.
sits there, I guess?
Yes, Commissioner Frederickson, again, very good question. The intent is to fence it. And again, because the area is going to be cleaned up, we intend, that's another component we have pulled from the construction and we're going to offer to the community. But it will be fenced. We toyed with the idea of recreational use, and then I found out through my CAMU justification homework exercise that we could not do that. But however, one of the things we will be considering that could be a significant asset to the water treatment plant is potentially putting solar panels in there. But it will be fenced and access will be controlled.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Anderson and then Commissioner Fortune. And Thatcher.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. I've been through a lot of presentations on this in the last 10-plus years. one of the things that I don't understand is I hear this word cleanup quite a bit, and it kind of reminds me when I was a little kid. I didn't like to clean my room very much. Or I would stick things in the closet and everything. It looked clean, but you open up that closet door and all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of dirty clothes. You have a whole bunch of, the room's a mess again. You have one little slip up, the room's a mess again. And this, to me, it looks neat, it's gonna be clean, it's gonna be neat, it's gonna be a cleanup, or it's gonna be hiding the mess. And personally, I feel this is more hiding the mess. It doesn't seem like a cleanup to me. That's one of my bigger issues with it. One of the other big issues I have with it is, you mentioned perpetuity, and every time I talk to somebody on some of these issues, the definition gets switched. When I think of perpetuity, I think of forever. Like the water treatment was going to be in perpetuity, and we're talking about if we do this, we can take 7 years off. But when you take 7 minus infinity, and you're starting with infinity, how does that work? I wasn't very good in math, but it doesn't make any sense to me anyways. If it was 100 years and you took off 18, great, I'd like that. We're down to 82, but I hope that's right. So one of the other things I have with this is we go back and we look at the record of decision before, and the other thing I seem to think, I always thought when I first started that the record of decision was a decision that we'd abide by. But, it seems like it's a record of a decision we're going to abide by until, well, we decide we don't want to abide by it and we're going to do something else, like stick all of our toys. I made a deal with my mom. I was going to clean my room, decided I didn't want to. I stuck all my clothes and toys in the closet. She opened the door and I had to re-clean my room. Explain to me how this isn't just sticking our clothes in the room, if you would, and then kind of a follow-up with this. The money is a big issue with this. We've tried numerous things. The original record of decision said we're going to clean it up. We tried a few things that didn't work, and now we're hiding toys or hiding chemicals, which is a lot worse and a lot more deadly than toys, unless you step on a Lego. But what reassurances do we have if, say, in 10 years, when we review this, we're not just going to say, oh, it's working fine, when it's not working fine? Are we just going to keep coming back 5, 10, 15, 20 years saying it's working fine, and then, 24 years later saying, this really hasn't worked at all and we need to do something completely different? Because that's what it's looking like in my mind. I highly doubt I'll be around in 24 years, hopefully, but we'll see. But I don't want somebody else to be up here asking these questions when we don't have the money, when we don't have the support. We can't be putting this kind of burden on the taxpayer over and over again when these things don't work. It's not fair to them. It's not fair. So there's that, and then to sum it up real quickly, say this cleanup doesn't work, or say something better comes along. Some new technology comes along, like Dr. Ray supported. The technology today versus 25 years ago is vastly different. I was talking to a friend of mine. He works for a pollution company down in Colorado. I used to work at APT. Little shout out to them. But that technology is constantly changing. The standards are constantly changing. How is that going to affect that? And what are our recourse if we do have a better technology that comes along? Are we going to open up the closet door, let all the toys run out, and then finally clean it up? Because originally this was going to be a cleanup. not to hide our toys in the closet. So I'll just let you respond to a few of those comments. Thank you.
Mr. Bauer, and I hope that you have a list of those questions to start with, so go ahead.
I do. I have 5 questions here, Commissioner Anderson, and I'll do my best. First of all, the cleanup was successful except for dioxin, and that's for the soils, and that's one of the most important things that everybody needs to understand. And then secondly, that we are bound by RCRA to keep the waste on site. So with that said, I would argue that we're not hiding the mess as much as we're going to do our darndest to control the mess. And not only are we going to control what is left from the original cleanup per the ROD, but through the new cleanup standards for the ESD, we're actually going to control that mess even better so that the other 27 acres can be used the way that they should be used in a cleanup, that they're going to meet those cleanup numbers and they're going to be used for industrial and commercial use and recreational use. Secondly, just for a correction, the water treatment isn't being forecasted to go into perpetuity. So everybody can take a deep breath and relax on that one. One of the things that we do when we're looking at budget and managing, and again, this goes back to what I was saying as far as the public doesn't really see what's behind the scenes. We do a project projection forecast. The last one we did was in 2016. That's projected, and it's will be updated again in 2022, but it was projected out to 46 years of pump and treat for the groundwater, and at 46 years there was no guarantee it was going to be cleaned up. However, with the research that we've done and the fact that technologies are changing, especially for groundwater and doing what's called in situ treatments for groundwater, we believe that we can get in there and significantly reduce the time required for that pump and treat. And honestly, only time is going to tell. But what we're doing is trying to take advantage of the use of that settlement in the best way possible and try to expedite that cleanup. I had number 3 is that the ROD, the cleanup, when you said that it wasn't effective, that again, I just wanted to remind everybody that the only thing that didn't pass was the dioxin. We met the cleanup numbers for the pentachlorophenol, and the PAHs are long gone. That's why I never talk about them. They biodegrade rapidly, and they are long gone. Managing the money is an iterative process, and it's what referred to as adaptive management, where you're constantly putting out a hypothesis, you're going through, you're looking at what would be the purpose? What would be your objectives? Can you meet them? Coming to a decision, and then following up on the decision and monitoring it and seeing if your hypothesis worked, and constantly working in this adaptive management cycle to give you the best product that you can possibly get. And that's how we are successful at managing settlement sites. When you have a responsible party obligated for the cleanup, they're still there. And it's a whole different process. They're still there, and they also play a big role in being at the table and what's going to be done and what's not going to be done. Whereas with a settlement site, that's been removed, and it's full steam ahead with some very bright people and the idea that we need to get this done for the money that was given for that settlement. And only time will tell.
Okay. Commissioner Fortune, and then Commissioner Thatcher.
Earlier in your presentation, you said that you were going to pull out the landscaping to have a local person do it. I guess my question is it a public bid, or why can't anyone else local bid on the project?
Mr. Bauer?
Commissioner Fortune, can you repeat your question? I'm not quite sure what you're.
Are you on there? There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So earlier in your presentation, you said that you're going to pull the landscaping to have a local person do it.
Pull the seating.
Okay. So are you going to put it out to bid for all local people, or what qualifies the general contractor, I guess?
By pulling that, yes, we will put it out to bid. And so anybody that has a drill seating operation or whatever is welcome to put a bid in.
Follow up, Commissioner Fortune.
I meant for like the whole project.
Oh, the rest of the project, Commissioner Fortune, because it is a hazardous waste project, will require, I mean, the bid will go out, and certainly any construction company can put in the bid, but it will have strict requirements as far as their experience with handling hazardous waste, whether or not they have the machinery and the manpower to do something like that, whether they have expertise in putting down a liner that's required on the CAMU, whether they have the expertise or not to decommission an LTU per RCRA requirements. So it narrows the field considerably based on those requirements.
Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know what's going on with my mic. Anyway, I just have two questions. Firstly, thank you for being here. First question is there any thought of routing Grove Creek back into its original channel? And the second one is, how much land out of the floodplain will be available for use after the cleanup?
Mr. Bauer.
Commissioner Thatcher, first of all, Grove Creek is outside my lane. That is to the south. And although the flood channel that we have going through the site from south to north to Silverbow Creek is being designed to accommodate anything that might come our way as it comes down Grove Creek towards Greenwood Boulevard, but that will be determined at another time by Atlantic Richfield.
Thank you.
Follow up, or you, go ahead. Okay, Commissioner Mankin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bauer, for being here in your presentation. Listening to it for the third time, which was great, and anybody else who was out there, hopefully they continue to stay following with this. But I know that we have Director Eric Hassler for Reclamation and Environmental Services, and I just wanted to maybe, the two of you, I know us as a community, we don't have to accept or not accept this property after the reclamation or the cleanups is done, but I just want to have maybe Eric Hassler direct that, or also yourself, Mr. Bauer, on that, to see where you stand on that, or?
Director Hassler.
Madam Chair, members of the council, that is correct, Commissioner Mankins. We do not have anything saying that we have to take ownership of this property. It'll be upon the Department of Reclamation and Environmental Services to follow this cleanup quite closely to make sure that the objectives of the ROD and the ESD are met. And then it'll be up to the governing body at that time to make a determination on our recommendation either to or not to take ownership of this property, but it'll be vetted throughout the process. We've been working hand in hand with David throughout the whole thing, so we're very familiar with it, but it's a decision that won't have to be made until the remedy has been implemented. And I also kind of, since I'm here, I'd like to touch on Commissioner Thatcher's question. There are no plans to reroute Grove Gulch. There's actually remedy components underneath the BPSOU rod that are to be implemented for Grove Gulch water treatment, which would be off of Lexington Avenue, so they'd want to keep the Grove Gulch going in the same direction that it is today.
Great. Follow-up question?
So seeing that we have, thank you, Madam Chair. Seeing that we have the both here, I also wanted to touch base. I know in the presentation that Mr. Bauer said that we were in talks with BSB about our storm water. So could we address a little bit more on seeing that the stormwater is such an issue in our community, and what we're going to do, and how is that going to be taken care of through the DEQ in this cleanup?
Mr.
You
Hessler?
want me to do that?
Mr. Bauer?
Commissioner Mankins, thank you. The stormwater at Montana Pole, as with any property, right now, the Butte-Silver County has the delegated authority to administer the MS4 permits on behalf of the state. And that's the process that we're going through. The reason I turned around is my boss I think she wrote that. So I'm just checking to make sure that I'm getting it right. Anyway, all we're doing is making sure we're complying with the requirements of an MS4 permit and working hand in hand with BSB to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions from council members? Commissioner O'Neill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bauer, thank you for being here. Appreciate your time. I have a question. How much money is is that a secret that how much money do we have left for cleanup?
Commissioner O'Neill, thank you. No, it is not a secret, and we give quarterly reports required to EPA, and I think we're currently sitting around $29 million.
Follow-up, Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you. Just a couple follow-ups with that. The cleanup you mentioned, the $49 million cleanup that was 16 acres that you just cleaned up, in comparison to the pole plant. Am I correct on the 16 acres for $49 million?
Commissioner O'Neill, no, that was just for the repository where the 1 million cubic yards of waste went. We cleaned up the Upper Blackfoot River, which was approximately 4 miles of floodplain and river, and removed mine waste, tailings impoundment of 500,000 cubic yards. And so that's what the $49 million went to.
Thank you. Follow-up, please.
Follow-up, Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you. So when you compare that mess and that price, if you will, in comparison to the pole plant, can you give me a comparison of cost? And because we have 27 acres we're trying to clean up, we have 29 million left. I mean, obviously the concern here is if we have enough money to clean up what we're cleaning up. So in my thick head, I'd like to have a little comparison of what that would be.
Commissioner O'Neill, one of the things that was done about 10, 15 years ago is looking at the technologies that could potentially be used for removing the waste or treating the waste underneath the interstate and other discrete areas. And I believe the cost for implementing that was estimated, depending on the technology, was between $1.5 and $2.7 million. And so when you think about the cleanup of this and then implementing another remedy and upgrading the water treatment plant, we're still going to have a considerable amount of money to operate the water treatment plant. And that's where it gets fuzzy. And, I can't stand here with assurances. Like I said, it's an iterative process. It's adaptive management. We go back, we check constantly every time a new technology comes around. And that's, as soon as this south side is done, we're going into phase 5 and starting our pre-design investigation. So the information will be forthcoming.
Follow-up, Commissioner O'Neill.
Last one. Thank you, Madam Chair. One more, Mr. Bauer, in regards to that. The gas line that you say that you guys have to work on the property, was that gas line put in there years ago? Or, why is there a gas line through there? To me, it sounds crazy, but I just would love to know.
Commissioner O'Neill, yeah, it sounds crazy to me too. But I think it's been there the whole time, because lower area 1, they remediated, lower area 1 removed waste out of there, and Northwest Energy contacted us, and they need to go back in there because that natural gas line they believe it was dented up a little bit during the removal in lower area 1, and that would have been back in the late 1990s? Mid-90s? So that was a long time ago. So it's been there for some time, probably before any of this started. Probably predated any of the cleanup, would be my guess.
Okay. Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll be a lot less. I just had a quick question that popped into my mind with this. What other options are there available? I know that everything has to stay in place, kind of, but you can take it off-site, clean it, but then you have to bring it back on-site, correct?
Mr. Brown.
No, sorry. Commissioner Anderson, no, it cannot be taken off-site. It can be taken out of place, placed in the land treatment unit, which is still on the site, but it has to go back to, and be placed back to where it came from on-site.
And a quick follow-up.
Follow-up, Commissioner Anderson.
I received an email years ago, a couple years ago, after one of these presentations from a company out of Canada. And what they did is they burnt soil and to eliminate the PFC and also the dioxin, and you heat it up to a high enough temperature, and then it's just going to eradicate and kind of kill all of that off. How come something like that, is that why something like that has never been looked at? Because you can't really, if like say we went with a company in Canada, you know, that's quite a long haul to, you know, you can't imagine how many truckloads of dirt that would be going there and coming back with it, you know, a continual train, I imagine, for a year or two. How would something like that work? Would that be even possible with the RICA laws, or is that something altogether different? And how are they doing that and making the feasibility of a company if they can't take it? Are they just working up in Canada, or are they doing other work in the U.S.?
Commissioner Anderson, again, that's a broad question, but first I'll get to the point that the ROD considered incineration, which is the term for that, as a remedy back in 1993, but it wasn't chosen. In fact, I believe I wasn't around for that. But from what I understand, it wasn't a desired remedy that the people of Butte wanted at that time. And I can also tell you from a technical perspective that incineration is a very messy, foul process. If you look at where hazardous waste facilities are located, they're out in the middle of nowhere, whether it's down in Utah, whether it's in Nebraska, whether it's just off the Columbia River outside of Oregon. There's a number of them, but that's where you would take it. And we actually, in the cleanup, did take waste to be incinerated, but it was the very worst of the worst. And I think it was about 15,000 cubic yards of oily, just messy, messy waste that was taken to be incinerated. These companies are not interested in incinerating what they would consider low-level waste of soils that are, 200,000 cubic yards of soil. I can tell you right now that that's about 10,000 truckloads. We checked in at right at 47,000 truckloads on that million cubic yards of waste in 3 construction seasons. So.
Okay.
Commissioner Fisher?
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I started this, I'm going to close out with a couple of quick questions, and I hope you'll have just a pretty quick, simple answers. The trees that were planted along the pipeline, and they were starting to prosper pretty good, right along the railroad track there, and they was going pretty good. Eric, you might even remember this, but them trees were taken out a couple of years ago. Will there be a border of trees on either side of that pipeline? They claim they took out the trees because it was interfering with the line that was going through there. So I hope there'll be some barrier be on that side of the pipeline of the railroad track for a barrier to the Boulevard neighborhood. The other question is, it's a difficult one, and I hope you can answer it. Is there any works in the plan to take the Diggings East waste to this same repository?
Mr. Bauer?
So can I. That's an
John's
easy
spot.
answer. RCRA doesn't allow it. First of all, I'll let you handle the eastern part of the
land treatment
Digging
unit and what
seats.
that's going to become. I don't think it'll need an area.
Well, there
Yes, sir.
again, it'll all be dependent upon Butte-Silver about taking ownership, but we have, and Jim, you'll have to let me know what the road is that runs just outside of the old Roberts complex. But if you carry that throughout south, then that direction going easterly, the triangle will be left as open space as promised to the Boulevard neighbor many years ago. And the palette is pretty much would be ours to determine going forward if we take ownership. And in regards to the repository, there's no way that will ever happen. And the repository for the diggings east is still to be determined.
Okay. Thank you for a lot of great questions. I know we really appreciate your being here, Mr. Bauer. I remember a couple other times that you've been before us, and the first time I think was kind of tense, but it's gotten better. And I really believe that as we follow along here, you will be our guide, and you'll keep us up to date on the process. So if there's no further questions, I will thank you for the presentation. We look forward to seeing what happens next.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
And thank you, JP, for putting this together. Appreciate that. Okay, moving on to our second presentation. This is communication number 2021-230. Dory Skrukrud, Greenway Project Manager, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization to request time on our May 26, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting to present an update on the Silverbow Creek Greenway. Dory, floor is yours.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman, members of the council. My name is Dory Skrukrud. I am the project manager for the Greenway Service District. I'm also the work in the Community Development Department. With this amazing dialogue going on tonight and this important update about the pole plant, we're looking at a long evening now. I would like to request, because there isn't a sense of urgency associated with this, that my presentation be pushed forward for the next committee of the whole, so that we can allow our consultants that are here to do the Uptown Master Plan presentation from out of town, actually get home to bed at a reasonable hour. And I'm very excited to update you, but I really would like to defer to them. They've been working, you know, just really getting out there, talking to the public, and I think this is really important because they're here, so.
Okay, so you would like us to move this to the next Committee of the Whole meeting, which would be the 9th of June?
Yes, if that's acceptable.
You
Thank
bet.
you.
We'll be glad to do that. Thank you, Dory. Okay, duly noted. Council Secretary? Item number 3, communication number 2021-231, Karen Burns, Community Development Director, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization to request time on your May 26, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting to present information on the Uptown Master Plan. Karen.
Thank you, Chairman Shaw, members of council. I am Karen Burns, Director of Community Development for Butte-Silver, and we've had a whirlwind couple of days with our consultants here, and I will introduce them to you in just one second. But we have been having public meetings for the last 2 days. This is the 6th public meeting we've had in 2 days. So we are really trying to get the word out there. We've had large public gatherings, we've had Zoom meetings, we've had a URA meeting, we've had a department head meeting, and I think we're getting a lot of really good feedback and a lot of really good information. So just really quickly to update this body, we started this process in 2018, to be exact. That this is something we wanted to accomplish and get done. And so we've been working very closely with our partners, with a group of citizens that have organized themselves into the Uptown Master Plan Steering Committee, Uptown Master Plan Association. The URA has had this as a goal for quite some time to do a master plan for Uptown Butte. And then we worked with the BLDC in terms of getting funding put together for this, and so we're all partnering in on this project. So we're really excited that we're at this point. We kicked this off in February when we were unable to meet in large groups. We had over 220 participants in those Zoom meetings to kick this off. So it's been really engaging and successful in that point in getting the public to be involved. In these last couple of days, in our 2 public meetings, we had over 100 attendees as well, which to me just speaks to the importance of this plan and this planning process. So I'm going to turn it over right now to our consultants from DHM, Walker Christensen and his partner, Gabe Peterson. Sorry, Gabe.
almost lost your last name. It's been a long couple of days. But they're going to go through just some really high-level presentation to this body tonight. We won't go into the detail that we did in our last public meetings, and then give time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Walker, the floor is yours.
Thanks. I'm Walker Christensen with DHM Design, and I'm from Durango, Colorado, and Gabe Preston is also from Durango with RPI. And so we've had some great meetings over the last couple days. It's been really exciting, really engaging. I think there's a lot of positive energy going through with this. And just to give you a brief overview, we're looking at Uptown. The blue is the URA border, but we're also looking at how it connects to Montana Tech and to the surrounding neighborhoods and to the trails. But our focus is really on the central business district, which is close to that green area. As we're looking at this, we're looking at it through the lens of the comprehensive plan and what the vision of the comprehensive plan was. And a lot of that has to do with, making Uptown a vibrant place and, pedestrian and bicycle friendly, incorporating culture and art, public and private partnerships, making sure that we have historic preservation and a clean and safe environment for people to gather. We've been having a lot of focus groups, so there's, Karen said we had 220 people in our first meeting and then 100 in these groups, but we've also had over 100 people in these focus groups, so we've been meeting with a lot of people over the last few months. One of the groups talked about preservation, and in our visioning sessions at our meetings, everyone talked about how much they love the buildings, what a resource you have, and that, we really need to preserve Uptown. And how can we do that? How can we create something that will help us? And that one of those things was talked about was design guidelines, creating a roadmap of the process, making it as easy as we can for people to get through the process, because there are so many great incentives. We went to the URA meeting yesterday, and it was just really fun to see all the projects that were coming through and getting assistance to help upgrade their buildings. We're looking at marketing and what are some strategies. We're looking at marketing a little different for Uptown. How can we help to fill vacant buildings and these business spaces, get them leased. We're also looking at marketing Uptown as its own well-defined destination. There's a lot of things in Butte that do market parts of Uptown, but we really want to market Uptown as a tourist destination. We're working with one of our groups is for social services, and we met with the continuum of care. And so we know that's a piece of Uptown that's always been, historically Uptown's been the civic center, and so we need to consider that in everything that we do. One of the common themes that we have heard in almost all of the groups is that we need pedestrian lighting downtown, and we need to make everything more walkable, improve the streetscape, and so that's one of the recommendations that we're going to be having in the master plan. I wanted to show you some concept sketches that we've done, just taking a lot of the ideas that people have had in our meetings and kind of placing them on a site, just on a concept level, so we can see what that could become. We've talked about wayfinding, pedestrian improvements, pedestrian safety. This is the intersection of Montana and Galena by Headframe, and there's a 100-foot right-of-way, so a really wide right-of-way there. Sidewalks are about 10 feet. To cross the street there is about 80 feet wide. If we're able to incorporate some pedestrian improvements such as curb extensions, enhancing the crosswalks, maybe creating a pedestrian refuge in the middle of the street, you could decrease the crosswalk distance from 80 feet to 33 feet from the curb extension to the middle. So really improving safety. There's traffic calming involved. There's beautification. We looked at how do we get people to Uptown, and so there's wayfinding all the way from the interstate until you create these gateways into Uptown. And one idea we had was maybe we play off of some of the the other arches and the structures of the head frame that people recognize as part of the fabric of Uptown, and something that, you know, shows that you're arriving at Uptown but doesn't detract from the beautiful historic buildings that you're drawn to already. If you see the curb extension on the left, it would be, bless you, taking away, you know, or just in the place of there's diagonal parking along there, so you could extend the sidewalk out 19 feet and bring back some pedestrian space that's not being used right now. That's not an area that you could park right at the corner, but it creates enough space where you could do sidewalk cafe space that can really activate it. And people really want this to be a walkable Uptown, accessible to all, clean, and, you know, open sidewalks throughout. We looked at the Mother Lode intersection, and knowing that a lot of people cross there and gather there when they're going to events, and, you know, some of the same techniques with the curb extensions or bulb outs, some of the ornamental historic lighting, some of these things that you start to see, that you start to feel like you're in a place that you should get out of your car and start walking around, and that can bring some more of that vitality, and also, you know, protecting pedestrians on a day-to-day basis. The alleys have been brought up as, you know, a piece that people think is really interesting that could add to the walkability of Uptown. You know, there's a lot of long blocks, and if you can cut through the alleys, you know, you can see some really interesting textures and historic parts of Uptown. There could even be, you know, walking tours through some of these, but just by adding light and maybe some art, some murals, you can see the head frame in the background at the terminus. Those are things that kind of draw you through those spaces already and make you want to walk more. So, you know, that's great for someone out at lunch walking around, or it's something that, you know, gets tourists interested in staying in Uptown longer. This is the pedestrian pass-through on Broadway that's looking up at the courthouse, and, you know, taking out that wall, adding some lighting, some pedestrian wayfinding, encouraging, as buildings do get developed, encouraging that they have windows looking at these pedestrian spaces. You know, that all adds to the safety of the space. This is behind the Quarry Brewery, and just looking at some of those same techniques, you know, bringing historically appropriate paving materials that feel like a more walkable space, bike racks, potentially, you know, tables that the brewery could bring out temporarily during the day, even secondary building signage that shows people that there's businesses there if they can't access that. This is already a place where people are gathering. The alley, as it heads out to Montana, is only about 6 feet wide, so it's not even, it's more of a pedestrian alley already. There's little things that we can do to really activate a lot of these spaces. Main and Broadway, one of the things that people have been talking about is needing more of a, you know, a gathering space, a plaza, parks down in Uptown. And this was one where the county already owns the parking lot there. So, you know, being able to have events there, even if this is a plaza space that doubles as parking on a day-to-day basis, or it becomes just a standalone plaza, this is one of the opportunities. There's a mural program in place, and that could be something that, you know, is on that big white wall on the corner there, but it already has this beautiful backdrop of the buildings, so you're taking advantage of what you have, but you're improving walkability, you're you're beautifying the space, improving safety, and giving people a place to gather. Here's another smaller one, so looking at different scales of public spaces. This one is at Hamilton and Broadway. This is already a really friendly corner, and it has public art, and you know, the buildings are really inviting. You see the original head frame in the background, and you can see how you can really shorten the pedestrian crosswalk, provide a lot more pedestrian space. This could be a space that, you know, doubles for smaller events during the folk festival, and it has that visual connection up to the folk festival as well. But the lighting, the historic character to it, and just really activating that space. Another big one was improving the original mine yard to be a full-time public park. And that, I think, is an opportunity that, this is an iconic photo that, you know, when you look up the folk festival or you look up Uptown Butte, this is what you find on social media, on the internet. And it's already, this is marketing for you already, because people see this and they're like, I gotta go there, you know. And so the more opportunities where we can combine the events and the historic backdrop is gonna do double duty for us in promoting Uptown. If it's a day-to-day park, it provides more opportunities for families and a wider range of people to be visiting, for tourists to come and stay longer. You know, there's health benefits, economic benefits. This is a park in Seattle called Gasworks Park, and it's one of Seattle's top tourist attractions, but they were able to preserve some of that industrial history. And so there's some parallels of where, you know, they have a balance of, you can see, you know, the cool structure in the backdrop, but they don't necessarily let people climb all over it or anything. They have events here, and it brings in a lot of money. They've done studies of how much money it can bring into the community. And kind of to wrap it up, you know, we're trying to figure out how do we tell the story of Uptown, and how do we promote this place that is so amazing, and you know it's so amazing, and I think it's really, you know, nationally significant. So you're going to be attracting people from Montana. You want people from your community to be using Uptown more, but you know, you can also attract people from other places. With the elk, you know, this is a really fun story about the history of Uptown, and you know, when things were really, really prosperous, and you know, they had this fun art and culture history already. We were trying to think, how could we bring something like that back that tells a story, and something in the similar location to where it originally was, something that's to the actual scale, because people don't really, you know, they can't imagine that, you know, that people did something that big and significant. So, you know, we did a simulation of what that could look like to do a mural on the face of that wall, and then a night shot as well. So, you know, we're thinking about, you know, all these things have to function in different seasons, have to function in night and day, be accessible to all users. And I think there's a lot of great opportunities, and it's been really exciting to present the last couple of days to the community. That's kind of a summary of what we've been working on today.
Thank you, Walker. And a couple of us attended the meeting last night, and it was pretty much in depth. And I remember it's been 3 years since we first started this whole process. And there's other elements that I'm looking forward to. A business improvement district, I know that might be possibly in the wings, but it's always exciting and encouraging to see possibilities. So that's how I look at it. Are there any questions from the council members for Walker or for Gabe or for Karen?
Real quick, I would just like to
Yes,
say, if you don't
Karen.
mind, I'd just like to add, so the next steps are, we still have a few small groups to get through. We have a few more of those groups to work through. And then, you know, the consultants will definitely go to work with drafting the plan to get a final draft together. And then they'll be back to our community in August to present the findings of that final draft. And getting more input to tweak it to the final stage. But part of that process will also be, you know, when we are drafting this plan and getting to that final stage, there's going to be objectives and actionable items to achieve those objectives. And so that's what we're really striving for, is a plan that we can put into action, and identifying, you know, who's the leader of that action, how is it going to be funded, is it something that needs to be funded, where those sources come from. So we are really trying to create a plan that we can start to put into action with things that we can start with right away, things that maybe are no cost action items, you know, that we can just really jump off and start doing. So we're really excited about the possibilities for this. I just wanted to add that as the follow-up, so we're happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Karen. Any questions from council members? Oh, Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't really have any questions, but I just want to say that I love this. I love this. And I've said this to Director Burns before, but a very wise man told me a long time ago, good things will happen in Butte if we let them. And so I can't even tell you. I love this town, I love this idea. Good job.
Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman Shaw. Thank you. It's a great presentation. It looks great. And I hope it moves forward, but there's always the financing, which you talked at the end there, Karen. I appreciate that. That's always something as the legislative branch of government we're concerned about. And I'm going to bring up another subject. It's a sore subject, but I'm the devil's advocate sometimes. Is there any way that you can integrate a medium point between historical preservation and demolition of derelict buildings? That's the #1 cause of Uptown Butte, that in my mind, and I hear from everyone. There's got to be a middle ground, and we go through ordinance after ordinance, and we go back to the same space. I've been here 8 years. So if we can find a solution, the middle ground between historical preservation and demolition of derelict beauties, we'll start having all them nice things that you're looking for. Thank you.
Ms. Burns.
Thank you, Chairman Shaw and members of council. Commissioner Fisher, wow, that's going to cost you. I'm just teasing. So I think that, not to be trying to be sarcastic or anything, but I do think this is something that we are working towards in this plan. This is something that we have addressed in our small groups that we've talked about, and it is something that we will be addressing in this plan in terms of creating, Walker alluded to it in his presentation, a roadmap of how we navigate what we have to do and what's in place and how is that working, and what we need to do to maybe tweak some of those things. But it is something we are addressing head-on in this plan.
Any other questions? Commissioner Mankins.
I just have a comment. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. It looks all great and everything else, but I know you guys come in as consultants to figure out a way to make us beautify or make it use the historical in the uptown to attract more people, more businesses. So what do you see on the other side of it when you come in with your eyes? Where are you? I can't remember exactly. Was it Colorado? No.
Colorado. Yeah, we're from Durango, Colorado.
Okay. So then when you come from there and you go, so what do you see that needs to, that we can do as, I guess, our community, besides, write the check that we'd all like to do real easily? But what can we do? Like, what needs to be changed? I mean, is the atmosphere, does the business itself, or what do you see coming from in all of the other places that you've developed?
Yeah, I mean.
Hunter?
I really don't think there is one silver bullet, but I think there's a lot of pieces that we need to work on and start to implement, and those can all build on each other. We need to look at how we can fill vacant buildings, what we can do with, vacant storefronts to create that density so that people do feel comfortable walking along there and there aren't big open spaces that, they want to turn around. There's, all of those things we're talking about, public-private partnerships. We need the community to really, come out and, start to understand this plan, to review the plan, and, support what you feel really strongly about. Help us prioritize what can be done, because in the communities that we work with, we do like to try and start to implement some smaller projects right away and build momentum to really get the bigger projects going. We know, we're proposing some things that are, big infrastructure projects, and that's not going to happen overnight. We're looking at the vision of what you want it to be in 10 years, but if you're thinking some things will happen in 1 year, some things will happen in 10 years plus, but really what we need is your support and the community's support in looking at the master plan, helping us prioritize, and that. I mean, there's so many other pieces.
I just have
Gabe, would you like to comment?
Gabe Preston.
Thank you.
RPI Consulting. I just want to add one thing, which is that as leaders of this community, you asked, how do we see this coming from another community? The way I see Uptown is it's incredible. There's nothing else like it anywhere. And we work all over, especially the Western United States. We've been to a lot of really cool places. There's nothing like Uptown. And so I feel like one of the things that you can do as leaders is have that confidence and be proud of this place. And the way you talk about this place has a huge impact. So I just encourage you to, because I saw it in some of your eyes when you were watching this, you know, and I'm hearing it in your comments, and people listen to you, you know, they elect you. So talk about this place and be proud of it, because it's amazing.
Thank you, Gabe. Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Gabe, and Hunter also.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say firstly, thank you again for the presentation. I just want to reiterate the fact that this is incredible, and I am of the younger generations to live here and to be on this body, and I wholeheartedly believe that in order to continue to keep people like me and people that have this diehard love for Butte in Butte, we have to be able to grow, and we have to be willing to do things that will make people want to stay here. And I do think that this whole idea of your guys is on the right track, so I really appreciate that. And as I said earlier today, I do think that this is something that Butte, Montana deserves, and I wholeheartedly believe that we see it through. So, thank you.
Any other questions from anybody? Well, thanks again. Seeing you 2 days in a row, and I can hope to see you even more, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we move into the body of our communications, starting with Section 2, Communication Number 19-582. Ed Vanderrob, Greeley Neighborhood Community Development Corporation, requesting Council of Commissioners to invite a Montana DPHHS toxicologist to give a presentation relative to the hazards and risks to human health of heavy metals contaminating present in the Butte-Silver community. I did talk to Ed today. This has been on our plate since 2019, but it sat around for a year because of COVID, and we were not able to get a toxicologist. But in the meantime, a health study group has been formed, and they actually had their first meeting about 3 weeks ago, addressing human health and heavy metal contaminants, and Ed seemed very happy what he saw at this meeting. And so I asked him, you know, if we could just put this to bed, and he said yes. So if there's not any questions about this, I don't know that we'd have any. I would defer to my Vice Chairman, Commissioner Frederickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to note and place Communication 19-5821 file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to note and place Communication 19-582 on file. Is there anything on the question? Would everyone please vote? Would anyone care to change their vote? Would the clerk please record the vote?
12 yeas, 0 nay.
Motion passes. Item number 2, Communication Number 2020-503. Dan Olson, Commissioner District 5, requesting Council of Commissioners to address the following problem with Butte-Silver Ordinance, Chapter 6.16, Livestock and Domesticated Hoofed Animals, as currently written, is unenforceable by BSB and does not interface seamlessly with MCA 81-4-201 and 81-4-401 to allow the state to provide enforcement. We had put this in the suspense file back in January in order to await the opportunity to have in-person meetings. It's difficult at best to have Zoom meetings when it involved a lot of public input. So that's why I had it reinstated and put back into active duty here on our agenda. Of course, Commissioner Fortune, this is now his district, so I would defer to you, and if you want to just make a statement, then I can open it up for questions.
I guess I'd like to start out with asking Mr. Olson if he'd give us an update. He's kind of sent us all emails, but get everyone up to speed. It's
okay.
If that's all right with you.
Private Citizen Olson. Had to do it, sorry.
Thank you, sorry I didn't get the dress code. I'm Dan Olson, former commissioner. I was one that put this into the record at the end of my term, and it's still an outstanding problem that I think we need to handle. Thanks to everyone for allowing me to speak, the Madam Chair, Commissioners, and Chief Executive Gallagher. what I'm going to go through is not all the stuff that I sent, but that little sheet here that kind of goes through the points that I think you folks need to consider. We have currently ordinance ordinance chapter 6.16 Butte-Silver running at large, livestock running at large ordinance. I've done additional work and investigation, and what I believe is that, well, the ordinance basically defines that it's unlawful for livestock to run at large within an area which is described in the ordinance, and it clearly states that the Animal Services Program Manager is responsible for providing suitable place where all animals taken up shall be impounded, and the same person shall take up and impound domesticated hoofed animals or other livestock found running at large, will charge an impounding fee based on the cost borne by Butte-Silver to make that impound and care after. It'll post a notice for impounding. We'll record the details of the livestock, brands and whether they're horses or cows and what colors they are, whatever, to identify the livestock. They'll also provide necessary forage feeding during that time period of impoundment. And to back that up, it also states it's unlawful to hinder, obstruct, or prevent the Animal Services Program Manager from impounding any animal liable to be impounded. So if they went out and tried to impound something, let's just take the cattle or whatever, if somebody obstructed them, they would be in violation and could be, I guess, taken into custody and charged with an offense. So it does give the teeth to Animal Services and the directives of how to do that. If the livestock owner doesn't come in and redeem the livestock, they can be sold. I think it is within 8 days. There's some other things that go into that, notices and whatever, but they can auction it off. And I believe that all this is also guaranteed by Montana Codes Annotated, which is MCA 7-23-4101, that allows basically a municipality to make this determination to round up the livestock and impound it and solve the problem. So I believe that it's enforceable. I think it's lawful. And what brought this to a head was in 2019, there was a rancher, or let's say, there's a landowner that leased his property for grazing to a livestock owner. And it was fine for the first part of the summer where the grass was green up on the top and the cattle stayed up there. Then as it got into July and August, they started coming down and they went through broken places in the fence and started grazing on the daffodils and daisies and trees and landscape lights, and basically doing a lot of damage. And that's when a group of Beef Trail folks got together and asked Animal Services to come down and enforce this. They're within the boundaries of the animal control area, and that's what I have. One sheet that I kind of passed around that identifies where that's at, but it's I'm going to say was it purple or green dots that went around? That's the Animal Services or animal control area. So I think that if this happens again, that we need to be able to enforce it. And I think doing that once or twice, word will get around to some of the people that are not abiding by the laws, and they let their livestock run free. If they ended up in, I'm going to say, the Montana livestock auction for sale, I'm sure that they would not let it happen again, or they would be there with the money to take them out of impoundment. I think if we put the teeth, if we have the teeth and we use them, I think it'll be we won't have to do it much more if we know that it is actually going to be enforced. Now, the future, one of the things that was a problem during this discussion was that everybody said, oh, we have a herd district, and that's not true. As far as I know, there's never been a herd district set up for Butte-Silver Bow. I went into the ordinances and put in herd district, and there was only one thing that I found for herding, and it was something about herding cattle or herding horses down the street or something like that. So that, as far as I know, there is no herd district set up. And Randy Poser, who is the basically the livestock inspector for this area, verified that he's not aware of any herd district that's ever been set up, just the animal control district that we have right now. Part of the problem is that since this ordinance was put in, which it was actually created in 1977 when they came up with the consolidated government, I'm assuming that it was in the county at that point, and they just moved it into the consolidated. There's been a lot of growth out in the rural areas. And Dan and Justin can probably verify that living out there. There's more and more new houses all the time, and they're buying property that was once ranch land, range land, and getting their 20 acres and putting up trees and trying to make it look nice. So it's happening out there, and I think it's not only a rural area. I think any place that you have neighbors having a good fence and keeping my stuff on my side and your stuff on your side of the fence, it makes good neighbors. Anytime there's somebody coming across your border, it stirs things up. So I think we need to enforce this and continue to work on it. And personally, I found that most livestock owners that I've contacted, when somebody's cattle was on the road, or I had a horse that was down in my property, I've had, I just call up the landowner and they go, oh, sorry, I don't want my cattle running around on the highway and get hit. Most of them are pretty cooperative and do this, but I think we need to be able to enforce it in a wider area of the county. For instance, Commissioner Callahan, up in his area, this is actually outside of the animal control district, so he has no way of encouraging the livestock owners to keep their fences mended and take care of their livestock. I think generally when you have a problem and you call them up, they come and take care of it. But it would be nice to be able to have this, maybe not countywide, but at least around the area that's growing into more suburban areas. Let's see. So I guess what I'm considering is that in order to expand it out in that area, it may be time to look at creating a herd district. That's a little more involved than the animal control district. And I won't really go into the details, but basically, if you define the boundaries, it has to be greater than 12 square miles, 12 sections. And I thought, oh my God, that's a lot of property. But if you look at the current animal control district and count up the sections, that's what each one of those squares is a square mile. There's plenty of space within that district to have 12 or more acres and to expand it beyond that. So it goes out and you define the area, and the landowners agree or disagree with that. And there's some details there. One's 55%, another has to be 75% of the landowners. But we'll worry about that if you go that way. It's going to be complicated, but it may be time to consider that, so.
Thank you. Dan, Commissioner Frederickson had a question for the county attorney.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Olson. It's good to see you, and thanks for sending all the emails, and sorry, County Attorney Joyce, but we've had conversations about this before, so it's not going to be a surprise. But I would like a legal interpretation of livestock to run at large. Is running at large considered, roads and public property, or is running at large, I guess, what's the definition between public cows running on roads? I could see that as running at large, but I have a hard time wondering if it's on someone else's property.
County Attorney Joyce.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Frederickson, yeah, we've had quite the discussion in the judiciary a few months ago regarding this, and it's not defined in the ordinance, but as Mr. Olson indicated, there is a jurisdictional area that constitutes our animal control district, and then there are ordinances for dogs and running at large, and then there's this separate ordinance on livestock. And my opinion is that it does mean running at large is in public areas on streets and highways, because that is what, the local government or the government in general has an obligation to protect, public thoroughfares, and that's what, that is where the enforcement lies. We're not really allowed to go on to people's private property. So when we discussed this in the judiciary, basically, we were also discussing the fact that we're an open range, state, and there's requirements for people to fence out. There's also requirements on what the fence has to, look like, or the requirements of what kind of a fence you can have. So it puts, a burden, I guess, on the enforcement side if you're in somebody's private property and you're determining whether or not their fence is adequate. So we would say, oh, yeah, we are going to enforce this one because your fence is good enough, but this one we don't think your fence is good enough. And so I really believe that the ordinance is intended for our animal control officers to enforce livestock that's running at large on public property.
Thank you, and hopefully I don't have any more questions for you tonight, but I can't guarantee anything.
Commissioner Reardon.
Thank you. I just have a question for you, Eileen. I'm kind of new to these food laws and all that, and I'm not on that committee and all that. So would there be an instance when, say, the animal control officers are trying to enforce this, and then basically something happened and all that? I guess my question is, should Montana code mandated be installed in this ordinance to begin with to protect any actions that basically take place in enforcing this if it has to run up the ladder? Thank you.
County Attorney Joyce.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Reardon, I'm not sure I totally understand your question, but obviously our ordinances have to, be in compliance with the state laws.
Okay.
So we have the ability to be, if it isn't an area of a law that's by statute given complete control to the state, we as a self-government power can be more restrictive than the state in certain areas, but we have to be at least as consistent as they are, and we can't pass laws that are inconsistent with state laws. But I think what Mr. Olson indicated about the herd district, that whole procedure is in the state law, and as he stated, you know, you have to have a petition filed, and this governing body has to approve it, but it has to be initiated by landowners, and it's either 55% of people, as long as the area has 25% residential, or it's 75% of the land in the district, and then you have to have a public hearing before this body so that people can object to having this herd district created. But once there is a herd district, it does allow for remedies for those people that would have livestock damaging their property. They are able to take that livestock and hold it until the person who owns the livestock pays them for the damages, and if they can't agree on an amount, then they can go to district court and sue them. So there is an ability for them to get a remedy that is beyond what's allowed for in our ordinance, which basically is just a misdemeanor. It's fine. So I think Mr. Olson provided all of you with the letter that he had, or communication with someone from the Department of Livestock that indicated he'd be happy to, you know, meet with landowners to talk about how to form a herd district. And, you know, it seems as though that is an avenue that would allow these residents the type of relief or the, you know, process that they might need to be able to collect damages from people that are damaging private property, from owners of livestock that are.
Thank you for your great professional opinion.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just, in this discussion, just curious how often this happens, and as far as fencing in and out. I mean, there is a difference between the cattle coming into on my house on Gaylord, right, coming through my fence, but if they come through my fence, it's just like me keeping a dog out, because I keep dogs or hopefully people out of my yard, right? So in my eyes, it's, if you own land and you have a fence, I guess whose fence is it? And I don't know, I mean, how often? This is the first time I've heard about it, and it's easy for me to say, so I don't have to deal with it, but in order to perform this herd thing we're talking about, don't we have to have, this has to be an issue, or, I mean, if this is again, I guess, where are we going with this and how often this is happening? And if you do own land, you should have a good fence on either side, in my opinion. So thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Fisher? Oh, excuse me.
3 times on our property last year in 3 months.
Hang on, I'm going to have you come up and talk in a second. Commissioner Fisher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, former Commissioner Olson. As you know, we've talked about this a lot. Your communication asks that we address this, and we have addressed it. So I think your next move is to put in a communication requesting what you would like us to do. Your communication at this time requests us to address it. We've addressed it through here, we've addressed it through Judiciary Committee, and I think it's time that you put in a communication, giving us some direction if you want to have heard, whatever it's called or whatever, but.
District.
Herd district, or, you know, whatever you want. I think it'd be a good time to put in what you want, and if we're going to go survey the neighbors or whatever you got to do, or the brand inspector is going to help you do that, I think it's time that we make that move and go forward, or you visit with your people and see. But I think in the areas you're looking at, I don't know how the vote goes, whether it's per parcel or per person or registered voter, or how that works, but I don't know whether you get the 55% or 75% or whatever you need, but as you know how the commission works here, I think it's time for you to put in a new communication and direct us what you'd like us to do, and we'll make a motion at that time to either have an ordinance rewritten or a resolution of a new ordinance, whatever it takes, and you know our county attorney will work with us on that. So that's my opinion. Thank you, Don.
So I do see a couple of people in the audience that have personally experienced the issues, and if they would like, they can certainly come up and speak, give us your address and name for the record. And
My name is Bill Bowden. I live at 112 Winky Way. I'm here because since we bought our house 5 years ago, we've had this occur at least once a year. Last year it happened 3 times. And the whole cause of this is that the person that leases out the land just doesn't keep his fence maintained. And I've gone out there a number of times to fix it. Part of the pictures that I sent around shows what I had to do real quick one day because the cows, we got them on the right side of the fence, but I had to repair the fence because every time we get a hold of somebody or tried to, we get just blown up. They don't want to do anything. So we don't mind having cows on property adjacent to ours. We live in Montana. That's a big part of our state. But when they get into your yard, they tear things up. Okay, they're not just the lawn, but trees, irrigation systems, their sprinkling systems. It just, they tear it up. So just like Dan said, having a good fence is just the thing. And this person just doesn't want to maintain his fence. And that fence has been there forever compared to the other sides of our property, which I think the original owners put in. So you could tell the difference. And I guess that's all I'm here to say, that this seems to be an ongoing problem. And I don't know what else we can do because talking to the landowner, the people that own the cattle, just doesn't have an impact.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Cody. I live on 109 Winky Way. And Josh, what you're talking about fencing people out, everybody up there has about 10 acres. So to put a fence around 10 acres is something. And Eileen, you know, I heard what you said, and I think it's also the county's position to have to protect the safety of individual property owners too, not just roads. And isn't that true? I don't know. I mean, you're the lawyer, but I would think that you have a responsibility to provide safety to the community, you know. And these deer, or the cows, in a half hour's time, I mean, they just pull big patches along grass out of your yard. They shit while they're eating, and it's not fertilizer at that point. It's damage. And you know, there is a law. I mean, we talked about this a couple of years ago that says this is some kind of district that's different than open range. And the reason it's different is because open range, you fence your cows. If you don't want cows in your land, you fence them out. But this district, and we've got this on the books, to me, we don't have to do anything. You showed me Molly showed me the map and the law number that says this isn't an open range district. This is and I don't know what the proper term was, but Butte-Silver did that on section number whatever. I mean, I don't know what name it is, but you know, 2 years ago they showed me the map and the law number that what Butte-Silver this group, this body passed a law that said, so in my mind, you just got to do it. The teeth were, you call up the guy, you put him at the livestock auction, and he pays. I mean, Jim, it's already been done in my mind. Maybe I'm wrong, but, you know.
I think this is it right here.
County Attorney Joyce, I don't know if you want to comment on that at this point.
Yep. Okay, so when this first was brought to our office's attention, Molly mistakenly thought we had a herd district.
It says right on that piece of paper you got that it's
No.
different than, and it may not say herd, but it's different than open range, correct?
No, what this
County Attorney Joyce,
Oh,
sorry, Paul,
sorry.
should let her speak. Thanks.
Madam Chair, So this ordinance that you're referring to is it defines an area that is our animal control area, our jurisdictional area. And so that's basically just like we have a jurisdictional area for dogs running at large. Livestock is a separate chapter of our municipal code, but it uses the same area which is, basically the entire city county.
There's a definite line on that map.
Yeah,
That
but
isn't
it's-
the entire city or county, and it says.
It isn't the entire
large
city
scale.
county, but it's larger than what used to be the city limits.
Right, it came out,
Paul,
this
could you
map
just
came
direct,
out 2
Paul,
years.
just direct your question through me, but it will allow Eileen to speak. Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry.
I know you don't know.
mean to
It's,
put anybody on the
it
spot
just gets
here.
too much of a dialogue, so
Sure.
go ahead, Eileen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we don't have, I think where the confusion happened is that if there was a herd district, that's going to be a defined area, just as Mr. Olson indicated, that has to be adopted through this council, and you have to have it has to start with the landowners, and they have to file a petition and define the area. And then, as I indicated, you have remedies under that herd district that are your private remedies that will help protect you from these issues that you've been facing. There is something in the law called the public duty doctrine that basically says that a public entity has a duty to the public, not to any individual person. So the public, meaning the local government here, through their regulations, they're protecting the general public, they're not protecting individual property owners. So that has been the discussion over the last, year or so in terms of enforcing that ordinance. Running at large means running at large typically on public property and not on individual, because you don't have a right to go into individual private ownership. So you really pick up those livestock when they're on highways or, and you pick up dogs running on the streets and in parks, and that's when the animal control impounds them. But, so that's the question, I guess, before, the body to decide, and it's, these landowners to determine whether or not they think that forming a herd district in that area would be the avenue to be able to address the issues that you have been facing, because, as I said, that those statutes, set forth a pretty detailed remedy that allows you to get damages from a property owner who allows its livestock to damage private property. And it's just not necessarily something that this ordinance would even help you with, because it's a criminal penalty and it's a fine, and it's not going to get you, necessarily.
So there's a law, or
Paul, go ahead.
is there a law that, what does this law do then?
Well, the law
Attorney Joyce?
prevents, it basically states that it's unlawful for livestock to run at large. And that's the interpretation of running at large. Is it running at large, is the jurisdictional area, meaning that you're running at large on public property.
And they have to cross roads to get here and stuff too. Isn't that part of it, or, seems like we're trying to overcomplicate this thing, man, I don't know, but, it's been going on a long time, and, people feel like they really haven't had it, just keeps getting kicked down the road and kicked down the road, and you guys showed me that thing 2 years ago, and I still, in my own mind, think there's some kind of remedy with the law we have on hand. They got crossroads to get to people's yards,
Commissioner, You, Callahan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This running at large thing is a little bit confusing here. I know Paul and Pam's house, they have to be running at large to get in their yard because they have to cross a road to get to their house from the pasture they're in. So is that not running at large? And then I think in the ordinance, when they pick up somebody's dog or cat that's running at large, do they have to wait until it goes out in the street before they pick it up? Or if it's in somebody else's yard and they call, do we not go in there and pick that animal up? Or do we have to wait for it to come back out in the street?
County Attorney Joyce.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Callahan, I guess basically what we are trying to, the way we're trying to address this issue is determining what is the best, use of resources. And we're not trying to overcomplicate it. I'm trying to find a remedy that really addresses the situation that the landowners have. And we don't really have the ability, I guess, through our animal control office, I know that it's in the ordinance, but we'd probably have to enter into a contract with the Department of Livestock to be able to impound those animals. And I think Ed Randall's here, he could, talk to what the resources that are available with his department to do that. But I guess, this entire discussion more has been about if you are going to go ahead and impound an animal, can we, do we have the resources to do it? And does that really address what these landowners' issues are? Because you then have to hold the animal, and then you're just going to, find the person for allowing their animal to run at large. And again, there's those issues about us determining whether or not there was a trespass or not, whether this animal should have been fenced out, and how these ordinances correspond with the state law provisions.
Director Randall, would you care to add your perspective on this from your department? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Ed Randall. I'm the Director of the Community Enrichment Department for Butte-Silver. Animal Services is one of the divisions within our department. So what exactly do you want me to answer?
County Attorney Joyce inferred that there was...
I guess I could, excuse me, Madam Chair. I guess I could say that I agree with the county attorney. When we discussed this at Judiciary, we felt as a department and as our legal representative that running at large is on the public right-of-way, and we protect safety and folks there. For many, many years, Animal Services has responded to public right-of-ways. We have long-term staff that know pretty much every animal, where it goes or who owns it and what we can do with it. Would we go on private property to retrieve a cow or a horse? No. We have taken animals that have been abused in the past, and we have the ability, and we lien or we get paid for the work that we do. I'm just trying to answer some of the questions that were kind of thrown at everyone. Is this a big problem in our town, our area? No, but it's important to the folks that do have the issue. And so 1 or 2 times is a lot. I had the opportunity to read Dan Olson's email early this morning with the county attorney, and Commissioner Fisher stated, what are we supposed to do here? Well, in some of his communications, it does say that, the state representative said the answer to your question is a herd district, and he would be glad to support that. I understand that these properties are 10 and 20 acres. out where we're talking about. And you have to understand that these ranchers they've been out there for 100 years. And since the ordinance was written, which I stated at judiciary, I would be glad to amend, and it should be amended. Shame on me. You know, when we have these issues, they come up and it's something that we don't deal with a lot, that should be amended. I waited to do that because we referred the communication from judiciary to now up in the committee of the whole. So the ordinance needs to be amended, first and foremost. I think that Dan Olson needs to contact, or whomever, because it has to be citizen-driven for the Herd District. And then we do have civil court for damages that folks can do, because the Herd District isn't going to address a lot of these issues. There are more fines in district court or city court, I believe. I'm not certain. So I really think that it really needs to start there. We could go back on and forth about the ordinance, or if they cross a street, you know, does that make it? Well, you know, I think that we need to look at the big picture here, and that's what I was stating at judiciary. This isn't an overwhelming problem for BSB, but it is an overwhelming problem for this area that a lot of beautiful homes have been built on in the last several years. And I understand that they're 10 or 20 acres, but we do have a law that, you know, you can fence out. And I know it's expensive, but, you know, these folks that have been up there for many years. When this little journey started about this, there was a miscommunication of whether it was a herd district or not, and then we were going in that area. And you know, everyone makes mistakes, and you know, we read something wrong. So we would be more than glad to work with these folks and amend our ordinance. We will always respond like we have when these folks have called. It might not be what they wanted, the result, but we've always responded. We have a good relationship with most of these folks, I believe. When we met with them, several months ago, or right before the pandemic hit. So I'm open to work with this group to start a herd district. I think that in Dan Olson's communication, the state representative again states that that's their answer. That's the answer, that's what they should do. And he would be glad to come and help them do it. So I'd be willing to answer any questions and that you may have.
Thank you. Commissioner Anderson and then Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. One of the reasons why I wanted this brought forward is so we could have this discussion and have an open dialogue, because I think having an open dialogue is the best way to handle these situations, and I think that we've kind of fleshed out an awful lot of what the issues are. The way I look at it, the biggest issue is that what this body can accomplish with the laws the way they're written is not going to satisfy your problem, unfortunately. I firmly believe that the best way to do that is going to be through a herd district, and that's something that we can't do. That's going to be on you and the landowners in that area, and I'd encourage you to do that. I think it's going to solve an awful lot of problems. One of the things that we can do is that there's a couple maps of Butte, the animal control boundaries and other things. As the community gets larger, we're going to have to rethink an awful lot of these boundaries, and they're going to have to expand. And that's something that might have to happen sooner and later. And that might make, in your area, her district, not necessarily a necessity, but for the time being, I believe it's the best way to do. So I would encourage you to reach out to the state rep. Mr. Randall offered to help on that. I can offer what little bit of knowledge I have on the situation. I grew up on a cattle ranch. I understand a lot of what they can do in a short period of time, and so I feel for you. I really do, but I kind of believe our hands are tied. I do believe there is some holes in this ordinance, some things that could be cleaned up. So at this time, what I'd like to do is make a motion to refer back to Judiciary Communication 2020-503, refer that back to Judiciary where we can clean up that. And that being said, I would encourage you to look into that herd district.
We have a motion
Yes, a
and
motion to move to.
we have a motion and
judiciary.
a second. Is there anything on the question? I was going to call on Commissioner O'Neill and then Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My comment was going to be, seems like we need a herd district, so that's the best thing we can do, and put an electric fence up on the one side of, I understand now where the Winky Way is, and where the problem lies, knowing people that lived up there that actually moved out of that way from where the cows were coming in. So anyways, the herd district that's where my recommendation as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Thatcher. And then Dan.
Eileen, roughly how long does it take to form a herd district, do you know?
County Attorney Joyce.
Sorry, County Attorney Joyce.
That's okay. She answers to both.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Thatcher, I know there has to be, I don't know exactly how long it would take, but they would have to get enough people to sign the petition and present it to the governing body, and then you would have to have a public hearing and allow protests, and then, pass the resolution to adopt the herd district. So it would take some time, but a couple months probably.
Follow
So,
up, Commissioner Thatcher.
in the event that these people face, a cow ruining their property or breaking a fence or going in that, I guess as far as the ordinance, I'm confused because if it states that it crosses a road or does whatever, anything like that, and you mentioned about entering in with a contract with the Department of Livestock, isn't that essentially our jobs? Don't we have to do what needs to be done, like what the ordinance says, I guess? I'm genuinely asking this question, I don't know. So, is it worth looking into having a contract with the Department of Livestock, at least in the interim, with this herd, until they get a herd district? Thank you.
County Attorney Joyce.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Thatcher, again, it goes back to the interpretation of the ordinance. Where is the livestock running at large? Are they public roads? Are they private roads? And I guess that's a question that this body would have to decide. I don't know that there's funding available to the Animal Control Department right now, but that was something that was discussed previously about, entering into a contract with them if, they needed it even for livestock that might be picked up on a highway, because we do need a place to hold them and have the ability to impound them.
Okay. Commissioner Fisher and Commissioner Fortune. Nope. Okay, you had your hand up. It's like an auction, got to be careful.
Thank you, Chairman Shaw. Dan Olson, please. If you were to decide to do a herd district, and I look at this map, look at this map, how big an area would you designate? And then I read here in this other paragraph that you sent to us, you got to designate the months of the year when the herd district is effective. So, there's a lot of loopholes to a herd district, more than one could ever imagine. And then it says here that, you got to be 1 mile width outside the incorporated city. You got to have this. And as I look at this map on Winky Way, which my nephew and niece live right up there across from Mr. Cody. So, I don't know, your district probably going to entail about 5 houses or so, isn't it? Or not many houses.
Mr. Olson?
Okay, one of the primary, it's right in the front of creating the herd district.
Yeah.
The herd district has to be a minimum of 12 square miles.
Right.
Okay? And if we created the herd district, I would propose at least including all of the area that's included in the animal control district right now. That would be my suggestion, and then expand it out into areas like Commissioner Callahan's, Rocker, Ramsey, areas that are, south of Rocker. There's a lot of houses there. I mean, those are the kind of areas we're looking at that used to be grazing areas. So that's the problem with herd districts, is it's a pretty long and public intensive process. And while I have the floor, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the control of animals running at large that's defined by the state. And what...
Mr. Olson, just hang one second. We still have some questions on the floor.
Point of order,
Follow up
because that
for
wasn't my
Commissioner
question.
Fisher, and then Commissioner Thatcher and Commissioner Sorge.
So one more follow-up, if
Go
I
ahead.
could, Madam Chair.
You've got my permission.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Olson, but when I read this, a herd district is probably not a viable way to go, and unless you're planning on getting a whole bunch of neighbors involved, and you know how it is. The more people get involved, the more it's going to be bad. And, good neighbors make good fences, and good fences make good neighbors, but something like this might make a lot of unhappy people in the area, so it'd be up to you to do so. I just was reading it here, and I thank you.
Commissioner Thatcher, then Commissioner Sorge.
Probably back to County Attorney Joyce. So in the event that a herd district was created, and as Mr. Olson just stated that he would hope that it would be the animal control boundaries as it is, do we still enforce that? Does Butte-Silver then take responsibility of the animals within the herd district, or is that somebody else? Because then essentially aren't we doing the exact same thing that we would be doing right now?
County
Thank you.
Attorney Joyce.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Thatcher, there's an entire chapter in the Montana Code annotated on herd districts, and there is a penalty for permitting animals to run at large in herd districts, but there's also provisions about trespassing animals in a herd district that allows the owner of property that has animals trespassing on their property to be able to take those animals and hold them until the owner of the livestock that trespassed on their property pays for the damages, and they also have the ability to go into court if they won't pay it voluntarily and get damages for their property that was damaged by the livestock. So there are different remedies available through the process, some of which are remedies that the landowners have to get damages, and one remedy that is a misdemeanor penalty of a fine of $50 or more than $250 for each offense.
Follow up?
Okay, so, but just to clarify, because I'm very confused, who would enforce the herd district? Would Butte-Silver, do they have to do that, or is that, like, if a cow gets out within a herd district, I mean, are we the ones that are responsible for going to get them, or is that, I don't understand. I probably don't make sense either, so I'm sorry.
So, Madam Chair, Commissioner Thatcher, so again, there are different provisions, and if it's a criminal penalty, then that would be a criminal complaint that would be filed, and that would be the Butte-Silver Borough, as our office would file a criminal penalty charging somebody with permitting animals to run a large in a herd district. But there's also provisions that give remedies to the private property owners. So those are additional provisions in the state law that give the private property owners the right to get damages from the person who owned the livestock that damaged their property. And they also have the right to keep that livestock until they pay the damages.
Okay, Commissioner Sorge, then Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's going to be a late hour, so I'm not going to say much. But I guess my thoughts are, I guess this is something that should probably be looked at. You know, some of these laws were probably created when there wasn't anybody living out in these areas. And it's not only in Butte-Silver, but it's everywhere. After doing research, it's in Bozeman, it's in Great Falls, it's everywhere where you're having the expansion, or people move out into these outer areas. And I guess it's just the old ways meeting the new ways. So my question to Mr. Olson is, have you talked to anybody like in Bozeman or up in the Great Falls or any of those areas, what they have done? Because after doing a little bit of research, I have seen where, they're running up against the same exact thing. There's having people.
Mr. Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Surich, I have not investigated that, but a lot of this is really pretty clear from Montana Codes Annotated and the information that was given to me by the livestock inspector, or I should have his title here. The advantage of a herd district is that if you create a herd district, then it is enforced by the Department of Livestock, okay? And an animal control district is administered by the local organization. And that's the difference. Now, the point also about can you go on private property, that restriction would apply both to the state of Montana and their officers, being the livestock department, or Butte-Silver Bow County and their officers, which is the animal control group. And it's pretty clear from the Montana Codes Annotated that they give basically the same control to the local government that they do to the state. Animals running at large is basically if they're out of your control. If they're running wild, whether it's on your property, a neighbor's property, Forest Service, or whatever, so.
Okay. Commissioner O'Neill?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to call for a vote, if we could.
Okay, we have a call for a vote. So I'll just, we have a motion and a second to refer this communication back to judiciary for further review of the ordinance. If I have that correct. If there's anything further on the question, if not, would everyone please vote? Would anyone care to change their vote? And would the, Josh, would the clerk please record the vote? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone, for a very good discussion. Thank you, Dan, for your input, and Ed as well. Okay, moving along. Item 3, Communication 2021-131. Ed Lester, Butte-Silver Bow Sheriff, requesting Council Commissioners' concurrence and authorization for the Chief Executive to sign the MOU between Butte-Silver Bow and the Southwest Montana Drug Task Force. I talked to Ed yesterday, and he is still waiting for feedback on this, and we will continue to hold this for 2 more weeks. Item number 4, Communication number 2021-182. Carrie Keene, on behalf of George Steel Company, requesting Council Commissioners' authorization to purchase the vacant Butte-Silver Bow property located at 750 South Wyoming Street. It is our intention, upon approval of our application, to use this property for a new metal-sided garage, which will house our new delivery vans. We did have this approval, and we got a recommendation from planning, and we did approve it last week. So Commissioner Frederickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to cross-reference Communication 2021-182 with Communication 2021-241 and place on file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to cross-reference 2021-182 with 2021-240 and places on file. Anything on the question? Would everyone please vote? Would anyone care to change their vote? Would the clerk please record the vote?
12 yea, 0 nay.
Motion passes. Communication number 2021-208, Lori Baker Patrick, BSB County Treasurer, requesting Council of Commissioners to direct the county attorney to prepare a council resolution authorizing the mailing of tax deed notifications. That resolution was passed on a suspension of the rules last week. So Commissioner Frederickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to cross-reference Communication 2021-208 with Resolution 2021-18 and place on file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to cross-reference Communication 2021-208 with Resolution 2021-18 and places on file. Is there anything on the question? Would everyone please vote? Would anyone care to change their vote? Would the clerk please record the vote?
12 yea, 0 nay.
Motion passes. Communication number 2021-209, Ellen Crane, Butte-Silver Public Archives Director, requesting Council of Commissioners concurrence to make a presentation at the May 19th, 2021 Council of Commissioners meeting. The presentation will provide a report on the activities of the Archives Chateau Department for the year 2020. We did have that presentation last week, which I missed, but it did happen. Commissioner Frederickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to place Communication 2021-209 on file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to place Communication 2021-209 on file. Is there anything on the question? Would everyone please vote? Would anyone care to change their vote? Would the clerk please record the vote?
12 yea, 0 nay.
Motion passes. Communication number 2021-230, Dory Scrukrud, Greenway Project Manager, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization to request time on the May 26, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting to present an update on the Silverbow Creek Greenway. She did ask that we move this to June 9th, so we will continue to hold this in abeyance. The next item is Communication number 2021-231, Karen Burns, Community Development Director, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization to request time on the May 26, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting to present information on the Uptown Master Plan. We did have that just this evening. Commissioner Frederickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to place Communication 2021-231 on file.
Second. Sorry.
We have a motion and a second, a rather slow one, to place Communication 2021-231 on file. Is there anything on the question? Everyone vote, please. Anyone care to change their vote? Would the clerk please record the vote?
12 yea, 0 nay.
Motion passes. Item 9 is Communication number 2021-248, Karen Burns, Community Development Director, requesting Council of Commissioners to approve the letter from Amy Klein requesting to purchase Butte-Silver property at 7 West Agate. It was sent to land sales. We'll hold that in abeyance, awaiting their recommendation back to this body. And the last thing on our item here is public comment on any public matter not on the agenda. I don't think I see anyone out there, so we will move on to anything else to come before us. Please stick around. At least I need 6 more people to sign this. I'll just pass it this way. Sign in date, please. And at this moment, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.